Hello there, this is Brian, and here is Maverick, and welcome to another one of our outdoor adventures. In today's episode, we will be hiking the Skippack Trail Loop in Evansburg State Park, located near Collegeville in southeast Pennsylvania. This is one of my personal favorite trails, and Maverick and I hike this often throughout every season in nearly every weather condition. Today, the weather's clear and relatively dry, which is great for this time of the year. If it rains too much, most of the trails in here turn to mud trails, which can prove challenging for a number of reasons. The trail splits here where you can take the high or low road. We are taking the high road, which follows Old Lesher Road. This trail is a multi-purpose trail, so you often will find that you not only come across other hikers, but also cyclists and the occasional person or group on horseback. There's quite a bit of wildlife to see here as far as fowl. Sometimes we'll see eagles. I've seen a bald eagle through here once, as well as many different smaller songbirds. Common in this area, you'll see blue jays, cardinals, and other similar birds. You can see that we just transitioned off the road and are on the main loop trail on the west side of the creek. This part is moderately challenging, but easy enough for most able-bodied hikers. This side is perhaps the most frequented part of the trail and includes information guides at various stations. We love this little section here. It allows you to go right down to the creek, and you can actually wade in and out of the creek. It's not very deep. And there's also a small little chapel right at the top of the stair steps, which we'll see when we come back up. And it looks like somebody is excited to get back on the trail. And here's that little chapel section that I mentioned. See some aquatic life around here. Occasionally we'll come across a bullfrog or other amphibian. There's also, I believe, trout in this creek for fisheries. And it is stocked at certain times of the year too. And as we're going through this trail, you will see little walkways which are built. As I mentioned, this trail can get a little muddy, so those do help you get in and out when it starts getting a little bit slick. This part we just passed here is a divergence you can take to an old farmhouse at the top, which is a pretty cool little visit if you have some extra time on your hands. The first European settlers in this area were Mennonite farmers who powered a lot of their industries from the water from this Skippack Creek. And there is a mill that remains further down the trail. And that farmhouse that I mentioned that we passed was from Paul Free, who was an early settler in this area. He would also frequent these hillsides in search of wild game for the table, including deer, squirrel, rabbit, which were very common during colonial times. And this wildlife still is very prevalent today. Often when we go hiking through here, we'll come across deer, squirrels everywhere, rabbits occasionally, and as I mentioned, a number of different fowl. Occasionally we also do see some great blue herrings in this area too, which are a little bit more rare, but is a pretty awesome sight to see in person. I mentioned earlier that this is one of my favorite hikes. I was an avid hiker when I was younger, but just as in many things, life has a way of distracting you away from them. I made a conscious effort to begin hiking again several years ago, and this was my second hike that I went on, with my first being the Cape May State Park Trail. Still remember how exhausted I was taking that first hike of just under 5 miles on the short loop of this trail. It's amazing how quickly you can adjust if you just take the time to commit to something, especially if it's something that you really love, like hiking, which I really enjoy so much. Now we're just coming across to the bridge, and this finishes the halfway point if you're going to take the short loop. Now if you look out ahead there in the distance, you can see a great blue herring sitting in the middle of the creek. We're going to take the extended loop, which is going to hopefully bring us a little bit closer to that guy over there. This is really just a beautiful area just to look out from. I often will just sit here and take my time and just let nature envelop me. The extended part of this trail is often quite overgrown, so make sure you are up to the task. It definitely helps to have a map on your first run throughs. You can easily lose your way. That being said, it's probably one of my favorite parts of this loop. Now that we sufficiently got far enough in, I'm going to try to backtrack here and get as close as I can to that great blue herring without bothering it too much. And as you can see here, the creek is pretty receded with it being dry and the preceding weeks. Since then, it's actually really filled back up with some recent heavy rains we had. And this is about as far, I think, as I want to get. If we get too much farther, we're probably going to scare him off, but it's a really beautiful bird to see in person, and honestly, this photo doesn't really do it justice. I mentioned earlier about this part of the trail being overgrown, and we are getting to the heavy section here. It actually doesn't look that bad, I think, in the video feed here, but I found myself just kind of pushing through brush left and right through here, just trying to figure out where the trail was. This part right here isn't too bad, but well, when you're going through and that grass is probably, you can see Maverick's about 2.5 feet tall, so that's probably about 3-4 feet high on each side of him or more. And this does eventually end, and this is going to have a sharp pivot turn into an open field, and you usually know you're coming close to it. You're going to start seeing a park appear up on the other side of the creek to the right, which is a little bit of a waypoint that you can navigate through. One thing I should mention about hiking Evansburg does have poison ivy occasionally. So when you do go hiking, unless it's in winter or maybe early spring when everything's receded, definitely recommend wearing long sleeve pants as a minimum, and perhaps some light long sleeve shirts as well too. Often when I will wear my long arm or long leg gear in the summer, I usually get some gear that is not only water resistant, where it'll dry off quickly if it gets wet, but also very light, so it allows it to breathe as I go through, which really helps quite a bit. It's still not as great as walking around in shorts and short sleeves, but definitely does protect you from the elements because you may enjoy a hike, but you don't want to have to live with the effects of that hike for the next week or two as things like poison ivy recede. Well, we can tell we're really getting thick here now. And one benefit of this, though, when you get into these really thick, hard to find trails, is you basically see nobody else on these trails. So you have this whole section really just to yourself, and really rather than just a really cultured trail or curtailed, that's not the word I'm looking for. Just rather than just a really normal trail that is a little bit detached from nature, you're actually much more into it when it's something like this. And we can see now we just opened up into the wider trail. You will occasionally see horses coming through here, but again, this part of the trail is really not frequented. I, at best, maybe see one hiker on here when I come through often. In this case, I didn't come across one hiker until the very end of this. There's a little bit of a creek crossing. In this case, there's not much of a creek, but it's always a little bit of a fun time. It's funny because Maverick used to be afraid of water when he was a puppy, but I guess that's just maybe being part of a puppy, or then again, he is a bit of a strange dog sometimes. So, but he is definitely coming to his own with water now. Now, eventually, as you follow this part of the more open part of the trail, it's going to lead to a bunch of grassy fields, which we're going to come across in just a little bit here. And just to look through here, again, this video doesn't really give it justice, but just coming through this area, it's just so peaceful, so relaxing. Really gives you time to kind of step back and disconnect from our busy world that we live in, and just to really remember what's important in life. Which is really just, what I found is that, appreciate those around you and just take time to enjoy the little things around you, which in the end I think means so much. So here we are entering that field that I mentioned earlier. This is just a really wonderful view of the countryside. And speaking of wildlife too, we just had this little stretch we have to hike here, and all of a sudden Maverick just stops, and I'm like, all right, what's going on? At first I think he's being goofy, so I go and take a look, and he found a little friend. It was a little box turtle, which we had to say goodbye to. Unfortunately, I think it really broke his heart saying goodbye to his new best friend he found on the trail. So we can catch a little bit of a glimpse of him. I don't think I took a picture or a really good picture of him, but if we look carefully, basically where he's rolling around, he's hiding nestled right in there. Now we cross this small little road here. We end up in the final part of the extended loop. And, I think there is an old overgrown trail that you can take right there further in. I took it once, got completely lost. I don't even know if it's a trail, but it looks like it's maybe an old trail that's no longer used. We kept on the main trail, which brings us back out to the main road on the eastern side of the creek. There's a little road section you follow, and this takes you to the last final phase of our hike, which definitely by far the east side of this loop is definitely the most challenging. And on the creek here, we came across another little rock piling. It's funny, I didn't realize this is actually a pretty debated topic, saying you're not supposed to do this, but personally, I think it's actually kind of cool. I've never done it myself. So if you're on the side that says do not do that, I have never done it, but Personally, I think it's kind of cool. It reminds me of when I was hiking up in the Great White Mountains up in New Hampshire, and a lot of the markers are actually stacked rocks, which is the only thing that's really visible in the wintertime, if you're crazy enough to hike that. And we're heading here. This is just a beautiful view of this forested area here. Um, it's really almost magical. It reminds me of something you would see in old like fairy tales, in magical forests and stuff. It's just beautiful. Now, as we get further up here, I believe that there was an old house or an old cabin or something up here, and it's deteriorated over time, but it's a great resting spot. And locals have been, adding graffiti to it, which I think actually just adds to the character of it. I just love sitting here. It actually gives you a really good overlook of the creek and just gives you a moment to just sit back, relax, and take a breath. Now, as we left, we were besieged by a group of obnoxious, rude hikers up ahead. Normally wouldn't say that, but it was a fairly large group. Of course, none of them wearing a mask during Corona, which is a big no-no. Completely no manners for the trail. And for the longest time, just wouldn't let us pass, so we decided to eventually just slow our pace. But, what are you going to do? It's a free park, so I guess they can do whatever they want. So I can't complain too much. This part of this last final trail can get pretty difficult. It's actually not terrible, I think, during the summertime, but when you're coming through in the winter, you got to be careful because here we're relatively low, but you could go up as high as 300-400 feet, and with probably 80-degree drops at points, which I thought was no problem, even despite the fact that some of these trails are maybe 2 feet wide at best. But I still remember going through, I think it was in December. It was either right before or right after Christmas. I'm hiking. All of a sudden, the trail gives way, and I find myself sliding down the side of the cliff. Fortunately, stopped myself, pulled myself back up. Didn't have to call the local fire department or anything worse, thank heaven. But you definitely, take this. If you've never hiked before, I'd still say try it, at least in good conditions. But just know what you're getting into before you start it. Now, as this trail is winding up, there's just this beautiful house on the other side of the creek. Just really gorgeous looking. Just can't imagine just waking up every morning and just overlooking the creek over there, just along the trail. It's got to be a great experience. Now, the final leg of the trail opens back up and leads right back in. And of course, we're besieged again by this kind of rude group that walked right by us without notice. Again, not wearing masks or anything. I'm wearing mine, just so you know. Trying to be respectful, help others. So, Maverick and I would like to thank you again for coming along with us on our hike of Evansburg State Park. Hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, you could really help us out by destroying that like button. It really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. If you'd like to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. And you'll get notifications on when we release new content. So we wish you the best and happy hiking.